Now that you have a sense of the suggestions that you use, and that you have a sense of the processes that you need to run people through in order to lead to self-esteem, the next step will be to start creating process instructions which will be tied together to create mini loops, which get put together to create those power loops. So, what kind of process instructions can you create in order to create your mini loops? Well, think about it. Direct suggestions or simple suggestions are very direct. They just feel this way, do this, do that. If you put these together, as we've already noticed, close your eyes and go into hypnosis, they tend to facilitate the process. So those are what process instructions are all about. But there are basically 3 different types of process instructions you can give people. They all have value. Now, I want you to run through these because they will help you construct your process instructions, which will help you create your mini loops. The 3 types of process instructions that you can create in order to create a mini loop are, first of all, what I call the random link. A random process instruction is as simple as you breathe in good memories. That is a simple process instruction for building self-esteem, right? Notice how the 2 ideas, breathing and having good memories, are actually completely random. There is no real connection between them. But I am creating a link, hence it's a random link, okay? But they work very powerfully. Just like closing your eyes and going into trance are not necessarily related phenomenon. There's lots of times you close your eyes without going into trance, and there are lots of people who've gone into trance with their eyes wide open. And yet, by linking those 2 together, it facilitates the process. The next kind of process instructions you can create is what I would call the pseudo-logical process. So a pseudo-logical instruction is one which sounds like it's logical, like it's reasonable and rational, but when you actually investigate the rationality behind it more clearly, more deeply, it isn't completely true. It isn't completely logical. It's more probable than logical. So here's an example. You felt good in the past, which means you'll be able to feel good in the future. Notice how those 2 suggestions, you felt good in the past, it means you can feel good in the future. It sounds like it's logical, but it does not necessarily mean. If you doubt me, then read any financial advertisement, and at the bottom of the small print it will always say, past results are no guarantee of future results. And it's true. Just because you felt good in the past does not necessarily mean you will feel good in the future, on pure set of logic. But it is highly probable. And because of this, a lot of people will take that probability as meaning it is actually true. Now you need to understand the difference inside your mind, so that you understand again how you're affecting other people. You can make the link random, you can make it sound logical, although it's not completely logical. Or it can be completely logical. It can be a pure exercise in logical reasoning, along the lines of, all human life is valuable. You are a human being, therefore your life is valuable. So notice that that is an exercise in pure logic. Given that all human life is valuable, that's the assumption that you're making, you can come to no other conclusion than that you as a human being must be valuable too. That is pure logic. Now, with those 3 processes in hand, with those 3 ways of putting process instructions together, you now have the tools to create your mini loops. Now remember, we have simple suggestions, which are stuck together into process instructions, which we've just gone through the 3 different types of, and they get now put together into little mini loops, which are stepping stones along the way to create a power loop. A power loop is something along the lines of the kind of things we've gone through already, like think of a pleasant memory, now think of an unpleasant memory, now think of a pleasant memory, and learn that you can go through this. These are just examples of these things. So what we want to do now is take everything we've done so far and begin to actually create our own mini loops and start creating our own power loops. So I'd like to have a couple of volunteers for this. Who wants to volunteer for this exercise?
Okay, I will, Paul.
Excellent, Paul. Excellent, thank you. So Paul, let me just before we run into this, throw the lines open just generally. Does anyone have any questions about what we've covered so far? And Paul specifically, do you understand the processes that we've been talking about? So we've got simple suggestions, we've got process instructions, we've got different ways of putting process instructions together. We put those together into mini loops, and then those mini loops get put together to become power loops. And power loops are the kind of loops that we've been talking about. In terms of self-esteem, we have gone through maybe half a dozen or so examples of different types of power loops that we can generate. And these are just examples. You can create infinite versions of these, just to give you kind of a starting point. So do you understand the way these things fit together so far?
Yeah, I think so.
Excellent. So now remember, when we're talking about power loops today, our focus is going to be self-esteem as an example of a transformation process that power loops are designed to augment or to achieve, right? And there'll be lots of others that we'll talk about in the later sessions. So, the first step that we want to decide on, Paul, is what kind of process do you want to focus on in order to create your self-esteem power loop today? Okay, so you can use any of the processes that we've discussed already, or you can create your own one. Just think about this. The outcome is, at the end of whatever hypnotic process you've gone through with someone, they feel more empowered, have stronger self-esteem, confidence, all these sort of things that basically imply a strengthening of the self-esteem, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what kind of processes would lead to that sort of thing? Feel free to make up new ones, or you can use any of the ones that we've talked about already.
Right. Okay. And as you experience this relaxing state of hypnosis.
Okay, let me pause you there a second. I'm glad you're diving in straight in the deep end to create something. I'm going to make it way easier for you. I don't want any suggestions yet. I just want the process. What stepping stones are you going to be aiming to achieve as your mini loops to create your power loop? So are you going to be asking to...
I'm sorry, you mean in the sense of either random, pseudo-logical, or logical process steps?
Even bigger chunk than that, bigger picture. So here's an example. What process are you going to lead them through to get them to feel self-esteem? Are you going to get them to recognize all the good things they've done in the past? That might be one way to do it. Are you going to ask them to keep thinking of more and more good memories? Are you going to ask them to think of a bad memory so they can process it through and then come out the other end feeling the relief of having let go of that? Are you going to get them to start feeling good for no apparent reason every day? What general process are you going to focus on today in order to build a self-esteem power loop? Which one of those or any other processes captures your attention or your interest right now?
Okay, perhaps the focus would be on feeling and continuing to experience more and more positive feelings.
Excellent. Okay, so you want to have your hypnotic subject feel good feelings and continue to feel more and more good feelings as time goes by, right?
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. So now let's deconstruct that as an idea into little stepping stones, which will be your mini loops. So that now, notice how that we've built up the toolkits from the bottom up. We're going to go from the bottom up, from the top down. We have the outcome, which is the big picture, which is self-esteem. We now have the power loop, which is the general process that you want to run through in order to get them to feel that self-esteem, right? And in this case, you decided to focus on have good experiences, good feelings, and feel more and more of these good experiences and feelings as time goes by, right?
Okay.
So now let's go a step backwards from that and decide what kind of mini loops are you going to put together to make sure that, first of all, they have good feelings, and second of all, to ensure that those good feelings become more and more as time goes by, right?
Right. I was just going to say, perhaps, in terms of deconstructing, a good starting point would be asking them to recall a time or to imagine a time when they were feeling particularly good and positive about themselves.
Excellent. Perfect. So you now have your first stepping stone. The first stepping stone is to recall a time they felt good about themselves, right? So what's your next stepping stone going to be? So now they have one example of feeling good. What's your next step going to be? What might your next step be?
I would ask them to relive it.
Okay, so that's part of the having memory, right?
Okay, sure.
So this is part of, remember, we're now talking in terms of stepping stones. So they've accessed one memory, they've relived it, they have that resource. So that's one complete mini loop done. What's the next stepping stone? What else would they don't have necessarily their self-esteem yet. Just because they've remembered something pleasant hasn't got the outcome yet where they're experiencing more and more good things every day, right? So you haven't led to that process yet. So what might be the next stepping stone?
Perhaps linking that, the memory of that experience to more and more their conscious day-to-day lives post the hypnotic session.
Excellent. So how are you going to create that link? How are you going to transfer from one step to another?
Future place it.
So you can literally
suggestions.
Okay, so you can just run through a process where you're saying, so you feel this here, you feel this here, you feel this here. Okay? But remember, now the point of process instructions is to make the unconscious do more and more of the work. So how about if you were to do something along the lines of, so you have this one memory, you felt like this before, that's one whole step. The next step might be a reframe along the lines of, so if you felt like this in the past, you can feel like this in the future, and trying a mini loop around that, right? Or you could have them memorize. Now that they've had the experience, you can have them memorize the experience. That might be a different stepping stone, okay? So I'm just giving you different options you can go through. Why? Because with the memorized experience and they have that resource, now you can say, now you memorize it, your unconscious is going to find it happening more and more often, and then you can do your whole future pace. So you have a nice three-step process. Or if you have the reframe, if you felt like that in the past, you can feel that in the future. For example, when you go to work, when you go there, when you go here, when you go there. So again, you have a three-step process, but it's built slightly differently. Do you notice how those two streams are similar but slightly different? One rests on them memorizing the good feelings and then dropping them into different places. The other one rests on them, if you like, believing that they're capable of feeling those feelings again in the future, so that the unconscious automatically makes them happen in different places, right? Those are just two examples.
Yep.
There's just two examples. You could have a whole bunch of other things happening as well. So the question for you now is, you've got the first step, which is they re-experience the resource, which is the happy or memory where they felt good about themselves. What do you want your second step to be? It could be any of those two, or it could be something completely different. It's up to you.
Okay. I'd say they find themselves remembering this experience more and more, which in turn leads to them enjoying similar positive experiences. Excellent. As they move forward with their lives.
Let me just pause you there for a minute. Perfect. So you now have a nice 3 steps so far. First step is remember the memory, the positive experience, right? Your second step is find yourself remembering this over and over again, right? So you're reinforcing that memory. That's the second step. So that's another little mini loop you can run them through. Your third step would be to make the next natural leap, which is now you're remembering this feeling over and over again, you'll start to just feel it for no apparent reason in other places, right? And that's pretty much achieved your outcome already. Although if you want to, you can still go a fourth step and do the actual future pace that you talked about, where you say you can feel it here, you can feel it there, when you turn the light switch on, when you touch your feet, when you do this, when you do that, all the rest of it, right? You could actually add that as a final step as well, although given what you've done so far, it's strictly speaking not necessary, right?
Okay.
Now, I want you to know something very important. This is very important when we talk about power loops. Notice you have no idea of what's content or what actual things are going inside them. You don't know what memory they're choosing. You don't know what problems they're facing. They don't know where their general life is going to be at. So you're being specifically vague. You're being very specific because they're choosing certain kinds of memories, certain kinds of experiences, etc. But you're being vague because you don't actually know any of the content. So this is how you can use your power loops to do pure content-free therapy as well. You can work with people and never know what troubled them, not have any idea, they'll never have to say a word about it. But because you've become so masterful at moving through these different steps and giving the unconscious very precise instructions on how to resolve the problem even though you don't know what it is, you still get the outcomes you want, right? So Paul, let me ask you, do you want to make this into a 3 or a 4-step process, given that you have both options? Because you've pretty much mapped out 3 or 4 mini loops to create your power loop. Which would you prefer?
The three step, I think.
Okay, so your 3 steps are going to be, just remind me. Step 1 is?
Recall a time when you were feeling good about yourself and experiencing positive feelings.
Step 2 is?
You find yourself, second step would be you find yourself more and more remembering this experience and the feelings during that experience as you move forward with your life. And the third step would be you notice that the more you remember this experience and the feelings associated with it, leads to you enjoying similar experiences and positive feelings.
Excellent. And that feels like, do you think that if someone goes through those steps, as you have suggested, and actually has the experiences you're talking about, do you think that is likely to help them boost their self-esteem, or not?
Yeah, I think so. I think going back to what you were just saying, and the earlier point, the qualification or the longest for me would be, well, you'd be looking for some sort of response, feedback from the subject to make sure, you seem to be getting the responses that were consistent with the power loop.
Precisely.
Especially with therapeutic work, I guess you need to be prepared to digress at times or change the script.
Absolutely. This is where mini loops start feeding into a different direction. So when you have a whole stack of power loops put together, and you might notice that one of your mini loops gets stuck, you may just decide to plug in a different power loop at that point in order to resolve that problem, and you go back to the mini loop, which is now resolved, and you can finish that power loop off. This is how you have loops within loops, and this is how I said to you before, no matter what happens, once you have a certain core set of power loops that you understand and have worked out in your mind and know how to run through without thinking about it, that you'll never really be stuck again. Because you'll have solutions for pretty much the most common problem that you come across in hypnotherapy, in education, in counseling, whatever your direction for the hypnotic work happens to be. You will notice that there are certain patterns that come back over and over again. And by creating power loops to solve those particular patterns, you take care of 90% of your workload. The other 10% are going to be those fringe cases where you do your real learning. And now you free yourself up to become really masterful because you become better at what you do. Now, because you are now splitting this up into very precise mini loops, you know you do not move on from that mini loop until you've achieved the little mini outcome that mini loop has got. And if you get stuck, you know that you need to do something else to solve that problem. In other words, you might have to have another power loop plugged in. But this gives you, again, a lot of freedom. Consider the difference between this and trying to memorize a script. A script is actually an attempt of giving you a power loop with lots of little mini loops built in. Now, if you try and memorize a script, you don't understand what's going on in there. And hence, even if a script happens to be a great one, which is very content-free or whatever it happens to be, you will get stuck with it because you don't know when to move on. I have seen people trying to hypnotize someone from a script which asks for eye closure, and have asked people to close their eyes 5 minutes after the eyes have already closed. Of course, that's going to confuse the hell out of the subject because they've already done that.